Welcome back to the Books Brothers podcast, the podcast where longtime friends spread across the country reconnect through the pages of a good book. Each episode we dive into what we are reading, sharing our thoughts and perspectives, all while enjoying a few laughs along the way. Whether your bookshelf is overflowing with the likes of Tolstoy, Dickens, and Hemingway, or you are still talking about reading that book that you bought 10 years ago. We are glad that you're here to join us as we explore insightful topics and narratives, all while connecting each week. I'm Adam.
I'm Fliz.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm Rob.
So we are excited to have you join this week. We are currently reading The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman. This week we read and will be discussing Principle 4, Let Your Partner Influence You, as well as the follow-up chapter, The 2 Kinds of Marital Conflict. I'm really looking forward to discussing this section and hearing your guys' thoughts, as the author spends a lot of time focusing on our role as husbands when talking about how partners should strive to be influenced by his or her spouse. But before we get into discussing that, let's take a break for a word from this episode's sponsor.
The Mansplain-O-Matic 5000, because no one knows more than you, especially her.
Sorry, keep going.
Ever feel a woman is dangerously close to finishing a sentence? Worried she might have a valid point? Fear not. The Mansplain-O-Matic 5000 is here to ensure you remain the loudest, most confident voice in the room. No facts required. Key features: auto-interrupt. Cuts her off the moment she starts talking with a preloaded, well, actually. Overconfidence booster. Increases volume while reducing accuracy. Wikipedia warrior mode supplies just enough misinformation to sound smart, but not enough to be right. The echo feature repeats what you just said, but louder and slower, so now you get the credit. New, not all men button instantly derails any discussion into why you personally are the real victim here. Order now and get a bonus, a free ebook, How to Apologize Without Taking Any Responsibility. Includes classics like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Warning. Side effects may include aggressive sighing, sarcastic, wow, thanks for explaining that, and indefinite couch sleeping. Mansplain-O-Matic 5000, because listening is for beta males.
I think that's the best ad of this podcast.
Oh, man.
Garrett.
I mean, there's Fruit Financial. Thomas has had a couple. I think that may be the best one.
My favorite is still last name. What is it, Rob?
Same last name. Southfinder.
That's so good.
I don't know why. That one's funny.
It's just so funny. Let's get back to our content. So let's talk a little bit about how they don't make them like they used to. Today, I wanted to focus specifically on hairstyles. We all have had a look that we were likely super proud of when we had it, but laugh at now. What was that for you guys?
I don't actually know what the name was, but it was like a super wet gel. I don't know. You put it in and it just made your hair look wet. And then you just kind of like streak your fingers through it and let it come down on the front. So you kind of have like it wasn't spikes like up, but like down.
I think that was my 7th grade yearbook picture. Was that one?
Yeah, that was one of my go-tos. Or just a buzz cut.
Yeah.
You guys ever
I don't know if
rock
that counts,
Mohawk?
though.
Did you rock the Mohawk buzz cut, Garrett?
What?
Did you rock the Mohawk buzz cut?
No, I don't think I ever did the Mohawk. I did
the faux hawk for a while.
Oh yeah,
I remember that.
I remember that. Yeah.
I did.
What's the difference again? What's the difference? I always get them confused.
It's just like longer in the middle, but you didn't have you weren't shaved, right?
Yeah. But not like a huge
Yeah.
Where you
difference
spike it
here.
up.
It was like, you know, more moderate.
I mean, I think the one that for me I think of right away, and Flez knows about it, but just like frosted tips, right?
I was waiting for it.
I dyed my hair completely blonde one year. I
Really?
had gotten I was fairly obsessed with my hair when I was like 5th, 6th grade. And I remember people telling me I was obsessed with my hair. And so to show I wasn't, I remember I dyed my hair blonde. And I was actually going for like as white as possible. But it hurt really bad to get your hair dyed. So I didn't
Why does it hurt?
It's like burning your head.
Oh.
It's very painful.
Really?
Yeah. So that was, I mean, but I think like another one of the funny ones I think of is like, I call it the ramp. I don't know what it's called now, but it's like all the boys had it where it was like your hair was just straight. And then at the top, it was like a ramp up. I mean, we probably all had that one, but that's a funny one to think about. And no one has anymore. On the girl side of things, one that I thought of that it just cracks me up still to this day thinking about, and I call this look, it's the popular girl who just went on a vacation to Mexico or Jamaica. And so we all know what I'm talking about, I assume, but this is when
I must not have
one of
had
the
very
popular
rich
girls in your school, she went to Jamaica or something like that, and she came back and she had like cornrows. She had like the beads. You guys remember this? Sure. And then like the beads down too. And the funniest part about it is with that, they almost always had to have a very sunburnt scalp too. That was always a part of it, and flaking, because obviously their scalp hadn't never seen that much sun. But that one, I still to this day laugh about. Like I can think of like multiple girls coming to school with that.
It's funny.
Did Ruth ever do that?
I don't know. I mean, she was a popular girl, so I'd assume. I don't know if she went to Mexico or Jamaica. So I'll have to ask her if she ever went to one of those places. And if they went to one of those places, they did it. Like it was what you did, you know? And so I don't know if it happened on the plane ride there or back, but it happened.
What are we talking about at this point?
For me, it was the bangs, man. And even in college, it was like you couldn't the wind couldn't catch you at a wrong angle. Otherwise, your whole hair day would be ruined. Your bangs would be all out of sorts. And then, you know, you used, I didn't really do it that much, but you used to do the old like,
the swoosh.
You'd bring the bangs like back to the side by shaking your head, or if you were at the pool and you had just like dove in, you'd come up out of the water and you'd really like throw that hair over to the side and let the water come off of it. But
I feel like you also probably had to listen to like Fall Out Boy or The Used if you had that hairstyle too, right? That was kind of that.
It was more kind of Charlotte. Good Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yep. That's in the same category for sure.
Yeah.
It's funny that you talk about Fall Out Boy, because I'm currently listening to the vocalist now with my kids, because the main singer does all the songs for Spidey and His Amazing Friends.
That's amazing.
Fun fact.
That's great.
Did I cut you off though, Flez?
No, you're good. That's awesome. That's way more important than what I had to say.
Thank you.
I didn't mean that sarcastically. That's pretty cool. But I had I think I'm trying to think of some of the ones that I had. I had bowl cut. I had just like the mop where you just like, I think that was 8th grade, where I just let my hair grow.
Yeah.
And it just looked like an afro. Like it just, my hair was so thick, it looked like an afro almost. And then buzz cut, faux hawk for a while, and then no hair.
Yeah.
Made a statement.
The hair would kind of curl on the neck.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like I remember sitting
That's what you were going for.
My mirror, and I'd be like trying to curl it because other guys would have the curl, but I wouldn't. And then, if it grew longer, then maybe you'd get it.
Rob, were you a puka shell guy?
A what?
A puka shell guy.
I don't know what that is.
I don't either.
Look it up real quick.
I don't know what that is either.
Puka shells. Think Hollister.
Oh, no, man. No,
that wasn't you? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, anyways, I think it's time to get back to the content. So, as mentioned before, this week we read Principle 4, Let Your Partner Influence You, and the follow-up chapter, The Two Kinds of Marital Conflict. Principle 4 really focuses on men in marriage, and some of the key points from this principle are: to share power. Letting your partner influence your actions and life decisions is essential for a long-term successful relationship. Men tend to have greater difficulty with letting their wives influence them than the other way around. This leads me to the next key point. Men should specifically seek to be open to influence. Gottman notes that when a man is not willing to share power, there's an 81% chance that his marriage will self-destruct. Honor and respect your partner's feelings and emotions, or feelings and opinions and emotions. Some men might cite their religious or cultural views as to why they believe that they must assert supreme influence over their spouse. But as I believe Gottman argues correctly, this does not mean that a husband is entitled to consistently dishonor and disrespect his wife. Accepting influence is about valuing your partner as a wonderfully made human being who has thoughts and feelings that can be different than yours, and thus, as a result, help you to better see the realities of the world. Compromise is essential. Being influenced by your partner helps you come to a solution that keeps both parties happy and thus keeps your marriage happy. And lastly, strive to be an emotionally intelligent husband. Gottman's research demonstrates that men tend to score lower than women in the area of emotional intelligence, although there has been improvement in this area in the recent years. The author encourages husbands to not be afraid of their own emotions and to learn how to better connect emotionally with their wives. This leads to better marriages, better fathers, and generally speaking, better men. So as mentioned before, this principle really focuses on our role as men in our marriage and our relationships. And while the topic of gender differences can be very culturally charged these days, specifically on the topic of what masculinity should or shouldn't look like. But in my own reading of this section, I really have to admit, I feel like I was fairly convicted. My actions and words may not have been as bad as some of the examples that Gottman gives in this book, but I could probably think of a few examples in just this past week where I did not excel at letting Ruth influence me. So with all that being said, what are your guys' thoughts and attitudes towards this section of reading?
Well, I think it's certainly powerful. I think there's a big difference between, I'll say, succumbing to your wife and saying yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear to everything is different than, really understanding like where your spouse is coming from, say like on an emotional front. So like I've grown more emotionally like available and intelligent through my wife because she puts so much emphasis and stock in that, and it's very, very, very important to her. And knowing herself, knowing her past, knowing wounds, knowing why she reacts to certain ways, like there's always a reasoning. And with me, it would just be like, well, that upset me. And it's like, okay, why did it upset you? And really trying to peel back the layers of why you are the way that you are, and just being influenced that way to be more emotionally aware has been powerful, because then, the first principle, right, is the enhance your love maps, is to know someone is to love someone, but that can be said about yourself, right? Like if you don't really know yourself, as deeply as you can, are you really loving yourself, which then allows you to love other people better at the same time. So
Rob, with that, you kind of mentioned some progress and growth that you've seen in this area. When did you kind of notice the difference with that? Is that something that you feel like you saw really in your relationship with Marianne before the relationship, or kind of through your time being married?
Yeah, through our time being married, for sure. I mean, she's shared some resources, and like I've read a couple books that she had recommended, and I honestly just even she just went on a silent retreat. I went on one last April. I'm going to go on one this April, and it's just like just investing in yourself in different ways. To know the Lord deeper too, right, has been big for me and us and our marriage. And so I don't know. It's been over, I'd say, like the past 2 years of just a personal discovery that's been catalyst because of how much she has done that for herself.
Garrett, Fles?
When I think of the let your partner influence you, curious how often you all experience this, but whether it's going to counseling, talking to parents, talking to trusted friends, or mentors, it's not uncommon for me to provide a recommendation on something or Brooke to provide me a recommendation on something, and I might file it away or dismiss it or not value it as much as I could, take it to heart. But then when someone else says it, I immediately and more quickly listen. I think we've experienced that a lot. And I wonder why that is. I imagine there's probably some elements of going back to the earlier chapters, like the NSO versus the PSO, prior experiences with your spouse positively or negatively affecting you. So you take in their information differently. But it's also speaking to why we need community, not merely an island of two people. But it is an interesting observation that I've seen in my life where I'll be a little bit more resistant to taking that criticism or advice, but then someone else gives it and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Can you all relate with that at all?
Yeah. It can be upsetting too, for the spouse,
Yeah, absolutely. Going back earlier too to what you were saying at the start, Stehlin, about personal examples, I think if anyone's honest, we all struggle with that as guys to some degree. And sometimes you don't know the extent of it until you go through it. I've used the example a couple times, but culturally, we've talked about money and financially providing as a way that guys can feel like they're contributing to the family. And when your spouse makes more than you actually does rather than theoretically, you can't really cross into those waters of how you view yourself and you view your spouse. Like, I don't know, it's not right, but it reveals where you put some of your identity in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like what he was saying, and you mentioned at the beginning, like a power thing or sharing power, like whatever that is. Sometimes you just don't know potentially the stranglehold that might have on your own life, how you desire to have. Maybe it's a control thing. Maybe it's a power and influence thing. And if you feel you don't have that as much, that can really, expose some of the weaknesses in your character or where you put your identity in false things. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Did any of you guys find yourself disagreeing with kind of what he was saying, or maybe even having negative attitudes towards what he was saying in this chapter?
I mean, it was heavily focused on men, let your wives influence you.
Yeah.
I mean, so I read it with my wife, and I wouldn't say that I had a ton. Like, she really enjoyed the chapter. She found a lot of the stuff fascinating and found herself like rereading it. And yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of it where it's like, it's harder to read some of it and be like, yeah, it's all right. And I need to, be influenced more by you. But if we're talking about kind of what I was getting at earlier, it's like, if we're very, or if the wife is very like emotionally intelligent, right? Like the story that they said about the friends, and they were like, oh, could you believe that he was amputated, that he didn't have a leg? And the guy was like, what? He didn't have a leg? Like, just guys can be so oblivious to certain things that women aren't, and so really, I mean, yeah, I didn't expect all of that in the chapter, but I mean, looking at it, there's great truth in that. Our wife is going to allow us to see a lot of things that we might not easily see that they can see, or feel or know. But
yeah, it's interesting you say that, Rob. There's something that I just thought of. It was kind of, I know, Garrett, a couple weeks ago you mentioned a myth that you had surrounding marriage, and I think a myth that I'm re-remembering right now. I always thought that the line of like, you complete me, or like, you make me a better person, I always thought that was silly. I always kind of thought like, oh, just be a better person on your own. Like, you don't need someone to be a better person. Just do it. And I mean, I know I'm being pretty direct about it now, but I think it took me, I feel like, a couple of years in our marriage to like see like, oh, definitely Ruth makes me a better person. And it just took a while. And I think maybe I had some stubbornness. I think I had some pride that maybe got in the way of some of those things where it's like, yeah, we'd hang out with friends and I maybe have a thought on a friend and she'd be like, why would you, that's mean. Like, why are you saying that? And I'm like, well, it's just you and I now, so it's okay. And she's like, no, like it's mean. Like, don't be mean. Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And I'd like to think I'm growing in some of those ways.
That's why we always say our better half, right?
Have you ever met someone who thought they were the better half? I haven't, but that'd be an interesting experience. Like, no, I'm the better half. Like that'd be awkward.
Sarah and I
is always the better half.
What?
Les is always the better half.
Bigger half.
Well, I mean, shoot, man. What do you deadlift like 220 pounds, right?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
I was going to say, Sarah and I talked about mansplaining before this podcast.
Yeah.
I found it interesting to get her take on it.
Yeah.
But my take was that mansplaining is just a guy being a jerk and that not all guys mansplain. And my other thought was that the way that we talk to each other, like us guys in general, we teach each other. That's like our ultimate goal is to teach each other. Like when we have conversations, that's literally what we're doing is trying to teach each other stuff. And so, but when we do that to a woman, sometimes it can come across as we're like telling them what to do almost, I think. I was running this by her to see what her reaction was. And she's like, no, I get that. Some men literally, like if I'm in a room and I call a guy in, then the person that's on the call will then listen, but they won't listen to me just because I'm a woman. I'm like, yeah. So I feel like the line there of like mansplaining versus being a jerk, like where does that get drawn?
Well, I mean, Gottman talked about how even kids, boys are open to influence of other boys, but not as much with girls, whereas girls are open to influence from boys or girls. That was at a very young age. I don't remember the age he was talking about, but it was like, I think it was like 5 or 6 year olds. And I think it's interesting to learn. And, I think a lot of these things, it doesn't feel like sometimes it doesn't feel like there's like an answer to that of, maybe that's how I feel, but it doesn't feel like there's an answer of like why it is this way or that way.
Yeah.
I think that the idea is like learning to cope and deal with that and kind of manage through that.
It's just interesting because she and I talked more and I'm like, I'm not that way at all. Like I respect women. I almost look to them more as leaders than I do men. And I think the reason is because I have 2 stepsisters that are my age and I grew up with them. The very strong-willed mother and sister and stepsisters, and I grew up with them my whole life. So like to me, like a woman is like very strong and like you look up to them. But like I think so that's just kind of how I've been raised. So maybe that's different from other men. I don't know. But Ian, I think that I don't know.
I do think that there's probably some component that like we don't get a pass though, where it's like, okay, this is something that like we all need to be like working on. And I'm at least doing it for myself, like that. I need to, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, it's like I see this, and in reading it, it's like, oh, it's a hurt, but it's also like, okay, like it's the reminder. So
I'm open to being influenced by it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the key, part of the key. So in the follow-up chapter to Principle 4, Gottman outlines the 2 kinds of marital conflict: solvable problems and perpetual problems. Perpetual problems are the same problems that keep popping up over and over again in your relationship in some way or another. So unfortunately, from his research, he found that the majority of marital problems are perpetual, which makes up 69% of the conflict that he observed. But his encouragement to us is you don't have to resolve your major marital conflicts for your marriage to thrive, but rather you do need to learn how to cope and manage with these conflicts as a team. These perpetual problems can lead to emotional disengagement and derail our marriage when we reach a gridlock. When we've reached a gridlock, neither party is willing to change, and you or your partner feel rejected and increasingly hurt by the conflict. So Gottman's keys to managing conflict, and specifically perpetual conflict, are: Negative emotions are important. When your partner is hurting or angry, even if it is because of you, we need to stop and listen. No one is right. There is not an absolute or objective reality in marital conflict. Acceptance is crucial. For spouses to change, they need to believe that their wife or husband wanting them to change understands, respects, and accepts them for who they are. And focus on fondness and admiration. We already hit on this in principle 2, but the idea is that for successfully managing conflict, we must pursue a fondness and admiration for our spouse. So in reading this chapter, I was able to almost instantly think of Ruth and I's perpetual conflicts that we have learned and are learning to manage. I even think it's helpful to consider them a perpetual problem or conflict. So with that being said, what are some of the perpetual conflicts that you face in your marriage? And what are some of the ways that you've either coped with them poorly or are dealing with them well?
I'm not answering your question. I'm more just making a comment that I forgot this part reading through this the second time, thinking of some problems or conflicts being perpetual, and that is okay. Learning how to manage it, and happy marriages can still exist with perpetual conflicts. So that was, even though I've read this before, it was pretty eye-opening. And to your point, it's almost a little reassuring, I guess, because sometimes I can get really defeated, feeling very discouraged if they're, we're going through it again, or this thing, or how often is this going to come up, but understanding how to work through that.
Yeah, I think that's really what I was saying too, where it's like, okay, like this is normal. This is okay. And we're going to have these issues. And, he said it on over and over again, where it's like conflict is not bad in marriage. It's how you manage and deal with conflict.
What was the page of where he kind of listed some of the perpetual conflicts?
I think one of the perpetual conflicts that we deal with in our relationship has been I have lots of things that I like and want to do. And I think Ruth at times doesn't maybe have as strong as opinions on things. And she would express this too. This isn't just me saying this. And with that, I tend to dominate our time, our schedules with the things that I would rather do. And I would say in the last couple of years, she has spoken up against this, and it maybe has become more of a conflict over the years. And there's like the part of me that's like very happy that, Ruth is like, and I think I shared a couple of weeks ago where she's like finding her voice in some of these things, but it's changing our lifestyle as a relationship, which is okay. But it definitely at times has caused like a little bit of rub or a little bit of tension.
It's good. I mean, I'll be the one, I guess, to say it, but sex is a perpetual conflict in terms of expectations for each side. But then the other two is probably the comfortability with clutter in the home. I have no problem leaving stuff around the house. Brooke receives a lot of peace having a clean home, like Rob mentioned with Marianne. And then the other one is just our general dispositions. I mean, you all know this. I'm a very intense person, and that's just how I kind of roll. It's kind of how I won't say I grew up in intensity, but I just really am able to focus under pressure, and I don't mind raised voices, straightforward, kind of like what you were saying, Fles, a minute ago, just straightforward talk like, hey, you're doing this way, stop, or don't do that, or do this. Brooke is more of like remain calm, basically the opposite of intensity. With if we're running late out the door, like, okay, we just need to be calm about it. And me, I'm like, this helps me focus. Like, you get the diaper bag, get snacks.
I do this too, Garrett.
Yeah. So it's like I can try to, we try to talk about things, right? And with each category I just mentioned, whether it's planning ahead, our week or the day. It's a little bit different now when your wife's 33 weeks pregnant. Your intimacy looks different, but then just learning how to have conversations differently and with intense moments, or planning ahead better so you're not running behind as much. Those are a few things that came to mind.
Fles?
I'm not married, so I can't comment on the question. No, I think I'll try to relate to it a little bit, but I think one thing that I'm stuck on right now is certain aspects of like Christianity, that a couple of different topics that she and I disagree on.
Yeah.
And I think the first couple of times I brought them up are related to like, she's charismatic and I'm like very moderate, non-denominational Christian, and with like a Lutheran background upbringing. So just very different from, I never even knew what tongues were until like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been like super hyper focused on reading everything about this stuff, and when I brought it up the first couple of times was probably a little too aggressive and like wanting to get my perspective across,
wanting to seek influence.
Yeah. She got defensive, probably because this is what she's grown up with her entire life.
Yeah.
And so, but then like tonight I still brought it up again because I'm trying to learn, because I feel a little bit attacked by certain things within that they believe. And I think that's ultimately what it is not wanting to feel attacked. But she's like, that's helpful that I know that. So now we can, but we had like a really good, healthy conversation about it. And I think the difference was just the approach, how the conversation begins, and like approaching it with love and curiosity and being open to influence, as opposed to like, I'm going to go in and prove my point. Why I'm right.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. That's how I could relate to this question.
Yeah, I think faith views definitely can be one in this category, and I've shared at least with Adam that Ruth and I have some slight differences, but there are things that still we've known each other now 13 years, and they still come up sometimes, and it's a conversation of like, oh, how are we gonna handle this? When our kids are asking about this, and we think this, and you think this, and I think it's not always knowing the answer, but it's how to communicate in those areas and come to like a happy place with it, a compromise that you both feel like is still being true to your faith system. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Books Brothers podcast. Join us next week as we discuss Chapter 9, which is Principle 5, Solve Your Solvable Problems, from the book, The 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work. If you've enjoyed listening or benefited from our conversation, please subscribe, give us a review, and share with a friend that you want to connect with. Lastly, we would love to hear your thoughts. You can reach us by email at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com or on Instagram @booksbrotherspodcast. Until next week, read, reflect, and connect.